What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Fitness for Life podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Lohr, and today I have with me Lorelei Capuzzi from just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. So, Lorelei, thanks for agreeing to come on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Lorelei, we met a year and a half ago now at the Raise the Bar conference, and great meeting all those folks there. One of the things I like to start out with, just so that a lot of the audience can hear, hey, how does everybody get to this point, and what's everybody's story, because they're all a little bit different.
Yep.
Is how did you get into training and fitness as a passion, and then what did that transition look like when it became a career for you?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up, I'm the youngest of seven children.
Okay.
We were all athletes, like multi-sport athletes, and always very active and doing things. Soccer was my passion, so I was lucky enough to play soccer through college. And it really wasn't until I married my husband, who's a retired Marine, and spending a lot of time around Marine Corps bases and seeing people lift more than just, traditionally I had been the cardio queen,
Mm,
just running all the time, which was, beneficial to my sport. But I
right.
didn't at the time realize how beneficial strength training would also have been. So it really wasn't, I would say, till about 20 years ago that I started lifting more regularly. And I fell in love with it. I really did. And I will say, probably less so for what it did for me physically as what it did for me mentally. Um, I kind of grew up in that toxic diet culture, and I swear my beautiful thin mom was on a diet every Monday,
Mm,
and she hid behind other people in pictures, and this was the age of the supermodels and all of
mm,
that, so thin was in for sure. And I was fortunate that I grew up with strong women athletes, where our mindset wasn't necessarily on shrinking ourselves. It was, to perform well. Um, but so, yeah, it was a radical shift for me to kind of transition less passionate about running and more passionate about strength training.
mhm.
Um, and then as my youngest child was nearing preschool age, I realized like I could probably make a career out of this. And so I did. I got my personal training certification, and was really fortunate that my local gym where I grew up going to, um, they took a chance on me and hired me with zero experience.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was the type of gym, so it was a YMCA,
Okay. Yeah.
which was, looking back, I'm so grateful for that introduction because I trained a very, very wide range of individuals with all sorts of body types, injury history, language
Hmm.
barriers. And I do think all of that experience really helped me as a coach. Yeah, so like I said, when my youngest was in preschool, I started training, worked at the Y for a few years, and then COVID hit, and everyone was relegated to their houses, and I actually had a lot of my clients reaching out to me,
Wow.
asking if I would train them, and so we did a lot of virtual stuff, and then transitioned to just working on my own, and now I have a home gym that evolved since COVID. And now the vast majority of my clients come train with me here in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been like a kind of wild ride to get here, but I feel like this is a good match for
Yeah.
me and where I am in my life. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And, I'm thinking of the people who are in, the other people that I know who are in Boston. Boston is, in a way, there's a lot of really good training education going on in that area. So, you're very close
Absolutely.
to, Mike Boyle, Kevin Carr up there, very close to, Eric Cressy and
Yes.
Cressy Sports Performance. A lot of like really high level folks doing some good work in your area.
Absolutely.
Um,
And, one thing I'm super grateful for was my first boss, who took a chance on me like day one.
yeah,
He basically rattled off. He was like, if you're not already learning from these people,
yeah,
you're going to start right now. And it was Mike Boyle, Dan John, Tony Gentlecore, Eric
yep,
Cressy, like, all of those people who it probably would have taken me a long time to find on my own,
absolutely.
and just was so grateful to kind of be steered there immediately.
Hmm.
And yeah, like I went to the Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning Center spring seminar. I, did some coaching from Kevin Carr and, I mean, their whole staff, everyone there. It is a phenomenal operation, really
Yeah,
is. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's super cool. Yeah, and very and thinking about that, like if your introduction was, hey, someone told your boss immediately told you to go look at Tony Gentlecore. I remember when we were at Raise the Bar, you actually got coached through an exercise by Tony on stage,
Absolutely.
which
Yeah.
is, I'm sure that was a bit of a whirlwind moment for you.
A little bit of a full circle moment. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
And funny sidebar, I did a Dr. John Russin's pain free performance certification up
yeah,
here in Boston, back in 2020. And we're in this small gym in Boston. And Tony Gentlecore walked in. He was going to record a podcast with, the presenter
yeah.
at lunchtime. And he walked in, and I'm having this absolute lose my mind fangirl moment, and absolutely did not play it cool with him whatsoever. But fortunately, he's so gracious. He, kind of forgave my clumsiness. But yeah, absolutely. And this is it. Like I think the other thing about these, kind of pioneers that are all, fortunate to be in this local area is I found them all to be wildly approachable as well.
Yeah,
Um, which, as a young coach, I am incredibly grateful for. They're all so gracious with their time.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the part of the reason why they are successful, right? Is who they are as humans. Very much so. The overarching theme tends to be the people who see success in the field are just people who care about people, right?
agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. Um, Breaking off a little bit, getting into the meat of what we want to talk to today.
Sure.
Um, you and I spoke a little bit before we hopped on. You and I serve a lot of the same people. Women, who are entering middle age or above. You know, I I'm sure both of us serve men as well, and people outside that demographic. But those are the primary people we work with. Um, can you speak to some of the things that you have seen recently, or things that demographic is uniquely struggles with outside of other folks?
Yeah, sure. I think, for good or bad, I'm in that group as well, and I jokingly refer to it as like our menopause era. Um, and, if I'm brutally honest, until I started personally experiencing perimenopause symptoms. And mind you, at this time, I was going through the Girls Gone Strong menopause coaching specialist certification. So
Yeah.
on paper, I'm reading some of the, challenges and how overarching and wide reaching they are,
Yeah.
and still was kind of like, it can't be that bad. And then perimenopause hit me like a train out of nowhere. And I was like, oh my God, I take it all back. I'm so sorry. Um, where genuinely, like the disrupted sleep, hot flushes, night sweats, weight gain, and like all around the middle, and just, so many changes that happened for me quite literally overnight and all at once, made it feel very overwhelming.
Mm.
One of the things that I have noticed in my conversations with lots of my clients, and this is to include women who are farther along in the game than I am, who are kind of my like menopause mentors, that oftentimes we're dismissed
Mm.
by our healthcare team, um, and or kind of made to feel like, well, is it really that bad, kind of the arrogance that I think I had before I experienced it. um, and I literally had my doctor say to me like, well, let's wait and see if it gets worse. And I'm thinking, I haven't slept through the night. Like, I feel like every aspect of my life is crumbling. I mean, like
Mm.
physically, mentally. And I was like, how bad does it have to be until we take it seriously?
Right.
And that, the thing that has struck me is how much that experience has been repeated for a lot of my clients, and also friends, who aren't clients, um, which I think certainly adds to the frustration, when you feel like, hey, I know there's options out there, and like maybe we could talk about some of the options so that I'm not just surviving, but maybe thriving, um, and to not get that response. And so for me personally, and I think a lot of my clients as well, it's forced us to do a lot of research on our own and kind of experimentation on our own, which can be good and bad.
Right.
There's a lot of information out there. And so I think, as coaches, it can be difficult to decipher like, is it just me or is this person crazy? You know what I mean? In the coaching world, so if you're outside of that, or like nutrition or
Mm-hmm.
supplementation or any of those things, um, I think it can be really difficult to know who to listen to, and
Yeah.
who's a reliable source. So I do think, again, in my experience, having women who are or have been experiencing similar things, like there's some camaraderie and there's some comfort. Misery does love company, where, for me, like I said, it was an overnight
Mm.
that I felt like every aspect of my life changed. Um, and that was, 6 months ago, literally Christmas night for me. It was like, what just happened to my body? And it felt like foreign territory, you know? And so, now 6 months later, trying to figure out in terms of training volume, what I'm doing for cardio, my nutrition, supplementation, the things that like, I definitely wouldn't say, oh, I am thriving, I am at
Mm.
the pinnacle, but I feel a lot better than I had been feeling, you know. And I'm sure it's the same, for your clients. I mean, there are days where, you know, I think the frustration is just so high. And especially when you feel like I'm doing all the things, it can be it can be difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like, obviously I'm not a woman. I'm not experiencing those
Yep.
things. And so I can only empathize with my clients, but so much. And you know, you mentioned, so I appreciate you being honest and open and sharing, like, hey, I had this arrogance about me
Yeah.
before I really experienced it and felt what it was like. You you're in this place where you're trending towards feeling a little bit better, feeling a little bit more under control. If you were to put yourself in your clients in that person's shoes again, who doesn't quite know the things that doesn't quite know how to go about researching, what would you say to them? Is like, hey, if there's you know if there's something out there that is not suiting your needs, if your doctor is not giving you the answers that you want, what are the next steps for that person?
Yeah. I think it can be challenging. So, kind of circling back, most of the women that I train grew up with that same toxic diet culture.
Yeah.
And, literally being as skinny as possible was the goal at any cost. I mean, quite literally at any cost. And so I think of, literally, I was thinking this earlier today. I'm so grateful that, like, my closest circle of
Mm.
women were the women who played soccer with me starting at age 5, right? And those women, that's still true, throughout my life, that's the closest circle of women that I have. And so, not to say that we didn't wrestle with that, but
Mm.
again, we had the performance, and the sport and the team aspect, like all of that was also in the forefront. Um, but the truth of the matter is, a lot of the women that I work with, and I'm sure that you work with as well, um, didn't have that other side of the coin,
Mm.
and the older I get and being a mom to 5 children, I realize, like, okay, our moms and dads, they're also human and dealing with their things and the things that they were taught and all the baggage they bring, and, good or bad. But one thing that really, really stays, like, in the forefront of my heart and mind is I try very, very hard to show my daughters that
Mm.
I want to be strong, that I want to feel healthy, that I want to be independent. My daughters have never heard me say, and my sons have never heard me say, I want to be skinny. And when I prepare a meal for myself or I watch them prepare a meal for themselves, I say, hey, that salad looks great. Where's the protein? And I very much want to shift that narrative just in my own home, because that wasn't the case for me growing up. And I see for a lot of the women that I work with, um, not because their mothers were evil, not because their mothers didn't love them, but their mothers were raised in that same, unhealthy mindset, scarcity mindset of, like, shrink yourself and you're going to be happiest if you shrink yourself.
Mm.
Um, and the flip side of that is that it's physical and it's mental, and so I do think, for me personally, I think one of the biggest things that I bring to my coaching is empathy
Mm.
and trying to listen and, make them feel heard. But I'll also sometimes have difficult conversations with clients where I have to challenge something that they say, like, is that objectively true? Or is that the narrative you've told yourself throughout your life? Or is that the narrative that someone else has told you throughout your life? And those conversations can be uncomfortable. And God bless my clients, because I would imagine there have been times where they're thinking, like, oh God damn it, Lorelei. Like, just, like, because it can be hard to be challenged. It can be uncomfortable to be challenged, and I jokingly refer to my basement gym as like a nest of trust, right? Where it's that one on one and there's no one else around. It's not in a big commercial gym.
Right.
So, I do treasure and honor the fact that I people tell me some deep personal stuff. You know what I mean? And like, I don't ever want a client to ever think like, oh, wow, she really dismissed me, or like, rep sets, programming, all of that. Awesome. I can do that. I can do that well. But I think it is much more valuable
Mm-hmm.
to have your, experience be honored. And I genuinely, believe that vulnerability is the key to connection,
Mm-hmm.
and when someone confides something in me, and like understanding, like, I am grateful, I appreciate that, I'm not judging you, I'm not sharing this, I'm not, I've heard you, and like, maybe these are things that we could work on,
Mm-hmm.
and like, maybe your thinnest self isn't your best self, and maybe, the endless cardio in search of like, oh, let's burn the number, let's close the rings, like, maybe that's not actually going to get you closer to your goal for yourself, you know so yeah, it's I do think coaching is an interesting and unique opportunity to connect with people,
Yeah.
and also the frequency, so like, yes, I do have some clients who train with me once a week. I don't think they see their hairdresser once a week. I know they don't see their doctor once a week. Some of them, if we're lucky, might see a therapist once a week,
Right.
but just those contact points, it's so valuable. And I think as coaches, we really have an opportunity, not to like overstate our importance, but like, I do think we have the opportunity to do some really good things in people's lives and be a positive impact, and like, you know, try to shift mindsets in a healthier way. You know, I will tell you that I have one client in particular who, you know, my biggest goal in working with her was to try to shift the story that she was telling herself. And so, yes, I do programming, and yes, we, work out, but that's kind of like more the vessel to have the opportunity to have these conversations. Um, and I think she'd be the first to admit that when all of that started clicking was shockingly when the physical transformation started.
Mm-hmm.
When it was like less of my value as a person is tied to the number on this scale, and more to like, I crushed my protein goal today, or like, I just hit a huge PR, and like, I was a little afraid, you know,
Yeah.
not knowing whether I was going to be able to do it. Like, that's the stuff, right? Like,
Right.
and I'm sure for you as well as a coach, like, that's what we live for,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Absolutely. I mean, I had, a client very recently, and this is a client I talk about a lot. I don't have favorites, but I talk about this client a
Yeah.
lot. But when she came to me, multiple surgeries in, had just retired, came into, flat concrete facility walking with walking sticks, right? Like,
Yeah.
needed that support because the fall risk was that great. Um, you know, couldn't get up and down off the ground without significant help, that sort of thing. And last week she hit a trap bar PR and hit triple digits for the first time.
Oh my
Uh,
God. Literally goosebumps.
yeah. and
Goosebumps.
she's always like, hey, don't tell me what weight's on the bar until afterwards. Like, you can tell me afterwards. So she looks up at me, and I was like, do you realize you just lifted 100 pounds for the first time? And
Awesome.
she goes, I need a minute. I need you to go over there. I'm a little emotional.
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that's
And
and that's the stuff, right? That's the stuff we want to see.
1000%. And I'm a mom, so I of five, so I also don't have favorites. I think someone can jockey for position on any given day,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Based on like how things are going. Um, but I similarly, I have a client who's a longtime friend,
Yeah.
and had a hard time diving in. We had a lot of like back and forth over the years, and she wasn't ready. And I am not the coach that's gonna like, hey, come on, hey, come on. That's not serving us. When you're ready to commit, I am here. Let's go.
Hmm.
Like we'll hit the ground running. But I can't make you want it more than you want it, right? And so when she finally started, it was the same, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm a firm believer of you start where you are and you work with what you've got, not like let's dive head first in the deep end, right? Build success, build confidence, build competence. And I literally will probably start crying. Like the transformation this person has had that's like psychological. Like, I mean, the number of times we've cried together in the gym
Hmm.
when she's done something and it's like, I can't believe I just did that, and I remember having this conversation with her, and she hit a big PR, never thought she would get it, and like just jumped up. I mean, just euphoric. And I was like, can I ask you a question? Have you ever gotten off of like the Stairmaster with that feeling?
Mm.
Or like finished watching the calories on the treadmill and had that feeling? Like, I've run marathons, I've done triathlons. Like, those are all awesome accomplishments. And like, this is not to take away. Like, I don't I'm not the kind of coach that says like, well, don't do CrossFit, or like, well, why are you doing bar? Move your body in a way that brings you joy,
Yeah.
that feels good for you. Like, let's do anything. I'm also very, very passionate about strength training.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe everyone can benefit, right? And that has nothing to do with weight loss, tank top arms, bikini body, like screw all of
Yeah.
that. But I do feel like for women and women my age, there is a certain amount of like badassery that you don't get anywhere else. You really don't,
Yeah.
and so I'm in the phase of life now where I'm like, I want to be playing with my grandchildren. I also hope I'm many years away because my oldest are 19, right? So I hope I'm many years away. But um,
Not
I want to
rushing
be
that process.
rushing that process. But I want to be active. I want to be healthy. I want to have a long, meaningful life. I don't want to be someone who can't walk from point A to point B,
Mm.
someone who has to say no to things that might literally just involve me walking upstairs,
Yeah.
and so there's something really, really liberating, if I'm totally honest, about this menopause era. And I specifically remember I was 19, finishing my freshman year in college when my mom turned 50. And I remember my mom, she gave zero F's after that. And like, my mom's always been a strong, independent woman, like very active, but she wasn't mincing words, and she wasn't worried about like offending someone else. It was like, you know what? I deserve to have a voice and I deserve to have my time. And I distinctly remembered that at the time. And now that I'm 49, I'm like, oh, yeah, I get it. You know, you spend a long time prioritizing other people
Mm,
and then realize, like, oh, crap, I'm 49 and I haven't ever prioritized myself. And so while that's a shame to have missed out on that time, I think it's also awesome to still have the opportunity to prioritize myself, prioritize my health, to set an example, hopefully, for my sons as well as my daughters, and, anyone whose voice I can reach out to, you know, and yeah, there is a whole lot of garbage like dumpster fire that goes along with the menopause era, and it can be a long marathon,
yeah.
you know. But again, if you have the ability to kind of shift the mindset and maybe look through a different lens and like, okay, I have the opportunity to like take stock of my life now. And what do I want in my life now? What do I want to give my time, my energy, my money, whatever to at this point in my life, and yeah, so, definitely a challenging phase of life. Um, but, I also, the women that I work with, the women that I'm friends with, like, they're bosses, and not, I don't mean that like in the traditional sense, but like
Right.
they've gotten stuff done for themselves, for their families. You know what I mean? Oftentimes their career, their, spouses, if they have them, significant others. Now we're also, many of us, caring for aging parents as well as raising children. And yeah, it's overwhelming, but also like it just proves how powerful you are, that you can have that impact in all of those aspects, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, man, I don't know if I can add anything to that. I think that's fantastic. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of that. Lorelei, we're approaching kind of the time that we want to be at. Is there anything that you feel like you didn't cover that you want to say before we hop off here?
Say that I didn't cover it, but like, ladies, like, just don't underestimate how powerful you are,
Mm,
and really lean into it physically, mentally. Like, you're super powerful.
yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Lorelei, thank you again so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah. Thanks for
Um,
having me.
is there, if people are looking for, more from you, where can they go to find you?
So I'm at Siren Call Fitness on Instagram. That's probably the best
Cool.
spot to find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for hopping
Thank you.
on. I appreciate it. And for those listening, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.